Good morning everyone. In last lecture we have started the topic that is mechanism of nerve transmission. So transmission means transfer of information. So that is transfer through nerve impulse. So it is nerve impulse. So that is the way to communicate between the nerve cells. So that is the way of communication between the nerve cells. So in last lecture we have discussed the nerve cell structure. So you can see this is cell body which has a nucleus, this is axon, right, which has this membrane, right. Keep in mind the axon has membrane. Then we have discussed the concept of resting potential. So in that the cell is present in rest state or unexcited state, and the membrane potential is minus 70 millivolt, and that can be said as polarized state. Keep in mind that is polarized state where the potential is minus 70 millivolt. In today's lecture we are going to discuss a new concept, that is the action potential. So what happens exactly in action potential? So there is change in the membrane potential of the axon. So that is short term change in the membrane of axon, in the potential of the axon, right. So now you know in the rest state or resting state there is a membrane potential is minus 70 millivolt, or you can say that is the voltage. Or you can say action potential is the response to the stimulus. So the stimulus that can be signal, right. And that stimulus axon has to respond that action potential, and that result in the change in the membrane potential of the axon. So action potential has some changes. So that will start with depolarization. So it is depolarization. So how it happens? In last lecture I have told you they have selected one animal, that is squid. For this experiment they have selected the axon of this animal. So you have to answer why they have selected the axon of squid. Keep in mind you have one question, why so in the experiment why they have selected the axon of squid animal, right. So when this axon is stimulated or it is poked with any fine syringe, or it is stimulated with short electric current, so what happens, there is change in the membrane potential. How? So to the response to this stimulus, what happens, there is some sodium ions channels get opens, right. So now you know outside the membrane, so there is a high number of sodium ions, right. There is higher concentration of sodium ions. So due to the opening of these sodium channels, what happens, they will get entry in the inside. So there is transfer of sodium ions inside the membrane, right. So due to that what happens, the potential will become less negative, right, more negative to less negative, and that is the positive change in the membrane voltage, right, and that is depolarization. So you can see in this diagram, this is resting potential, that is about minus 70 millivolt. So in depolarization phase what happens, there is opening of sodium channels, right. So due to that what happens, so sodium will travel from outside to inside, and that will cause the change in membrane potential or membrane voltage, that is depolarization. So I will repeat again what is depolarization. In response to the stimulus what happens, so there is opening of sodium channels in the membrane. So due to opening of that what happens, sodium ions will get entry inside of the cytoplasm, so that will change the membrane potential. So that change will happen to the less negative voltage or less negative potential, or that is, you can say, the positive change in the membrane potential, right? Initially it is about minus 70 millivolt in the in the resting potential. So this is about depolarization. In resting potential, the membrane is polarized. In action potential, as the this change starts, what happens? The membrane will depolarized. So that's why it is depolarization. As sodium ions gets entry inside, so the membrane will get depolarized. Depolarized means what? There is change in the polarity. In depolarized state, the membrane potential will change from minus 70 millivolt to minus 60 millivolt if it lasts for only few seconds. If the stimulus lasts for few seconds, the polarity will change from minus 70 millivolt to minus 60 millivolt. But what happens if the stimulus depolarizes the membrane beyond the certain point? So that will cause more change in the membrane, that is about minus millivolt, that is threshold value. So you will get question, what is mean by threshold value? So what happens? The membrane depolarizes beyond the certain point or beyond the certain value, so that is threshold value, and that value is at about minus 50 millivolt. So in a depolarized state, what happens? So depolarization lasts for only few milliseconds, and after few milliseconds the membrane can be retained in resting potential state. But what happens if the stimulus last for longer time, or it is if the membrane depolarizes beyond certain point? So that is threshold value. So what happens in the threshold? We are going to discuss that. So due to that, if the membrane depolarizes beyond certain points, so due to that, what happens? There is opening of voltage gated sodium channels. So what is voltage gated sodium channels? So there is opening of voltage gate. What is voltage gate channels? So these are the channels that opens due to the difference in ion concentration, right? So what is voltage gated channels? Those are the channels that opens due to the change in ions concentration. So what happens in depolarization? There is change in sodium ions, and if the stimulus longer for lasts more time, so that will cause change in the ions concentration, right? So sodium ion will move inside. So due to that, what happens? So there is opening of voltage gated channels if the membrane depolarizes the certain beyond the certain point. So I will show you this diagram. You can see in this diagram, so the voltage has become plus 40 millivolt. Why? Because there is opening of sodium voltage gated channels. So due to the opening of voltage gate sodium channels, so there is large number of sodium ions will move inside, right? And that membrane potential change up to the plus 40 millivolt. And up to a certain point, what happens? There will be equilibrium in potential of sodium ions, means that so there will be same ion concentration in both the side, outside and inside, due to the opening of voltage gated sodium channels. So what happens if the membrane depolarizes beyond the certain points there is opening of sodium voltage gated channels. So due to the opening, sodium will move inside, right? And after that the sodium concentration will become same outside and inside, that is equilibrium of equilibrium in potential of sodium ions. And you can see the change, that is plus 40 millivolt. If and now you know equilibrium means there are same sodium ion concentration, so now there will be no movement outside to inside or inside to outside. So next phase is repolarization phase. What happens in repolarization? As approaching the equilibrium potential of sodium ions, so after that there will be inactivation of sodium voltage gated channels. So sodium voltage gated channel will become inactive. So there is change in membrane potential due to the sodium ions. In response to that, what happens? There is opening of potassium voltage gated channels. So you can see there is opening of potassium voltage gated channels, so that what happens? Potassium ion will move from inside to outside, and that will achieve the potential or voltage about minus 80 millivolt. That is repolarization phase. You can read this. So there is inactivation of sodium voltage gated channel. In response, so that will change some membrane potential. In response to that, there will be opening of potassium voltage gated channel, so that will allow the potassium ions move from inside to outside, and that will establish the potential towards the negativity, and that is about minus 80 millivolt. And after that there will be achievement of resting potential. So this is about action potential. So one is in action potential there is change in membrane potential like depolarization and repolarization. You can see this graph also. So this graph will be helpful in entrance exam also. You can see, so this peak for sodium ions and this the red peak for potassium ions. So this is about action potential. In next lecture we are going to see what is meant by electrical and chemical transmission.